What is this book about? The book The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Skloot tells us the story of a black woman in Baltimore, Maryland whose cells were stolen. She was a hardworking mother who changed medicine for the world with her immortal cells to this very day. She had cervical cancer and started her journey going to a hospital called Hopkins, who took part of her cervix skin to run tests without her knowledge during the surgery. She believed that the surgery was just to get rid of the majority of the cancer that the radiation wasn't getting. After testing the samples, they began to realize the cells were tripling and growing at rapid speeds. Dr. Gray, who was obsessed with finding medical discovery, began sending them to any scientist who wanted them. People had the idea to make the goal of making people immortal, which after years and years realized they weren't going to be able to do that without finding cures for other sicknesses, along with learning about contamination and removing the rest of cancer the radiation wasn't getting. She later died, and we learned from the point of view of her loved ones, example, Zachariah and Deborah being part of our main sources of information since her husband Day was too old. This story goes on to tell us about the illegal testing that was going on without people's knowledge and laws being made. It talked about how her family suffered over years due to not being able to afford health care, even though Gila, which are Henrietta Lacks cells, made millions of dollars for other people. Over the years, her children were abused, died, and in jail, mental hospitals, or spent the rest of their life working on a farm or in a factory with poor conditions. Due to the racism back in the day, made the journey for the Lacks family very hard. Since most of them didn't have an education, it was hard for them to understand that a part of Henrietta was still alive. Henrietta's sons wanted to gain some money out of it, but her daughter Deborah was still searching for the truth and found it. Later, left this world after celebrating Mother's Day. What I like about the book was the way that the author was a reporter on the story. It showed from her perspective, but you also read the story like a book through members of the Lacks family point of view. The author used a lot of different techniques to express her story. I like how she really connected to Henrietta Lacks' daughter, Deborah, and threw in minor details throughout the book that had a huge impact towards the end of the book. For example, Deborah's valuing, like, the item that of her mother's, which, for example, is her mother's Bible. She had a hair of her mother's that, like, was like a book page, and it was like a braid. It was a small little braid of her mother's hair, and the museum had tried to get it, but Deborah immediately said no and hid it because that was the only thing that she had from her mother that she didn't want to share, because she felt like she was sharing her mother with the whole world already. After explaining the hardship that Henrietta had to go through, we turned the story over and saw the struggles that it had on her whole family and the effect that it had on the world. At the end of the book, it talks about the reporter / the author rewatching Deborah's favorite movie, Spirit, with a few other family members. Ironically, that was one of my favorites as a little kid. But they ended up popping a videotape in. I don't know how I'm going to go, she said. I just hope it's nice and calm. But I tell you one thing, I don't want to be immortal if that means living forever. 'Cause then everybody else just gonna die and get old in front of you while you stay the same. And that's just sad. Then she smiled, but maybe I'll come back as some helper like my mother. That way we can do good together out in the world. She paused and nodded again. I think I'd like that. Page 310. I think this was a great way to end the book. It honestly tied the whole story, basically summarizing an unfair event that had happened, but caused a great result. And I also love the attitude that the family had throughout the whole situation and how the author really cared about the Lacks family and didn't just go after the story for money or the, like, fame of it, but for the experience of it and for the importance of it that led the Lacks family to having their story published, and because this was life-changing. And I like the creative way that she wrote the book, which is the main point of this. I liked how she had very deep and beautiful lines, and I like how she really connected with the daughter. Two of my favorite passages. The first one. For some context, Henrietta died when she was 30. The Hopkins Hospital wanted to run tests on her children to make sure the cancer didn't spread to them. What they actually wanted was to see if her kids' cells were immortal too. Turns out Gila cells were only immortal because of the cancer, so her kids did not have immortal cells. They didn't end up reaching out to Deborah, her daughter, who was 30 at the same age as her mother when she died. Deborah was terrified after hearing how Hopkins mistreated black people and didn't like how they were hesitant to release information about her mom. The knowledge of her mom made her scared, and she didn't want to die at the same age. She hated having to grow up without her mother and didn't want the same life for her kids. Deborah sobbed, saying, Lord, don't take me away from my babies. Not now, not after everything we've been through. Page 185. And I decided to choose this line to talk about, not only to talk about Deborah, but to express the importance of this line. She was one of the main ones who did not care about the money from her mom, but the story of her mother. And after all the years of being attacked by reporters for the story and attacked physically, she realized her sister went to a mental hospital when she didn't need to. Elsie was her name, was tested on. Her son was in jail. Deborah had grown up poor, dealing with abuse and dealing with her brother's anger issues. And the reason why this line is important is because throughout the story, you hear about how her daughter struggled so much throughout her life, but she still put everybody first, and she was still happy with, like, the little things in life. It shows her personality, and it shows the anxiety side of her personality and how she leans on her religion for a recentering. It shows the emotion. I can hear her saying that line with a crack in her voice, like her heart was breaking at the importance of not letting her kids grow up without a mother like she did. It was very vivid, which I enjoy because I am a very visual reader. So I think that's why this line stuck out to me, was just because I could picture her sitting in a chair talking to the reporter and just realizing, like, I can't go back to this hospital. I need to put my kids first. And it was just very triggering because her mother was the same age as her, so she was just very worried she would die. Going off that, the second quote would be off Deborah's character again. We learn how much she cares about her mother, just to the point where she almost drives herself to her own death by a heart attack. Since she wasn't putting her health first, Gary is her cousin, who really understands how to calm Deborah down. But through the book, we kind of see the religious aspect of it. Now, they don't talk about religion necessarily trying to persuade the religion, but they do express how you could tell that the Lacks family were a part of the Christianity religion. Like the Bible, said Gary whispers, man brought nothing into this world, and he'll carry nothing out. Sometimes we care too much. We worry about nothing when there's nothing to worry about. 289. Now, this isn't the only line in the book where they talk about the Bible or the feeling like white people were trying to act like God, trying to make people be immortal as they continued testing her cells. For example, sending them up to space and morphing HeLa cells with different types of animals. But I really like the way that they worded this passage because I think it definitely relates to what's going on in the book. It also relates to anybody. I think it really spoke out to me as a reader because I agree with the statement religiously and not religiously. I think it shows the connection between the character Gary, who was just introduced, to a character Deborah that we had been getting to know a lot and see her journey. And I think it was a very lovable moment. And we didn't really get too many of those because it was a lot of difficult things to process through this book. And during the process of learning about her sister and her mom, and how they had such a hard life, she said, sometimes learning can be just as painful as not knowing. 271. Which, I don't know why that line stuck out to me, and it kind of goes along with the other one. I know I said two quotes, but I just wanted to add this part in because it doesn't necessarily go along with the religious aspect, but it's another quote where it's the advice aspect of it, and unlike a line that I think was needed to be said in this book, because it doesn't relate to just this book, it relates to anything, and I think it's a line that many people should hear, and it's just, in my opinion, just worded perfectly. Like, something bad can happen, but there can be a good outcome. And I think that was the whole premise of this book, was, yes, this was a horrible event that these people had to go through, the Lacks family had to go through, but it was able to create medicine. It was able to bring her daughter peace, finding out everything. It was able to do many things. What does this book teach me? The story on how one woman named Henrietta Lacks changed medical history, and not many people give her enough thanks for all the trouble that she went through. This book taught me a lot, honestly. I did not think I would really enjoy this book, but I honestly really think that is an important book for everybody to read, because not only does it affect every single person in this world, this woman is a miraculous miracle who saved many lives. It teaches us why certain laws were made. Example, doctors have to tell us all the risks and everything they're doing, because without our consent, it's illegal. Now we have more rights, and it's a safer life, less discrimination. We have more equality. This helped die down racism to a certain extent. For example, when they released the woman's race was a black lady, the first time the mainstream media had reported that a woman behind HeLa was black. This was big news. 197. From my perspective, I also believe this book teaches you to appreciate a lot more your loved ones, life, time, rights, and work. Like, to be happy that times have changed, and to learn this woman's story and to be grateful. So the premise of it was basically her story and how the HeLa cells came to be a thing, but also just the aspect of living life, having a bad moment turn into a good moment, making the best out of a bad situation. And I mean, there's a lot of different ways and you could have taken little things out of the story, but I think overall that is what I would say. Thank you.